The canals of Venice shimmered under a pale moon, their dark waters reflecting the flickering lanterns that adorned the city. The year was 1571, and the city was alive with the grandeur of a masquerade ball. Music and laughter echoed across the labyrinth of waterways. But within the festivities, hidden behind masks of gold and feathers, secrets thrived. Selene Veyra stepped onto the marble floor of the Grand Palazzo Contarini. Draped in a gown of midnight black that seemed to drink the light, she was a vision of elegance and danger. Her mask, intricately carved with onyx and studded with tiny rubies, framed her crimson eyes. She blended seamlessly into the crowd, but her presence turned heads nonetheless. She wasn't here for the music or the dancing. She had come for Count Adriano de Luca, a man renowned for his charm, his wealth, and most of all, his reputation as a libertine. Selene had heard the whispers of women who had fallen for him, only to be discarded like yesterday's amusements. He was a predator in his own right. Tonight she would show him what it meant to be hunted. Adriano stood near the edge of the ballroom, a glass of wine in hand, his mask pulled slightly askew to reveal a devilish smirk. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair falling in waves over piercing green eyes. Women flocked to him like moths to a flame, but his gaze shifted when Selene entered. She made her way through the crowd, her movements slow, deliberate. Adriano's smirk widened as she approached. "You've come uninvited," he said, his voice smooth, almost teasing. "I didn't realize you owned Venice," Selene replied, her tone equally playful. "But if I'm unwelcome, I'll leave." She turned to go, her gown swirling around her like liquid night. Adriano caught her wrist, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Stay," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur. "A beauty like yours deserves to be admired." Selene allowed herself to be led to the dance floor, where the crowd parted for them. The music swelled, and they began to move, their bodies in perfect harmony. Adriano was skilled, his hand resting lightly on her waist, his steps confident. "You're unlike anyone I've met," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. "Then you've been meeting the wrong women," Selene replied, her lips curling into a smile. The dance ended, but Adriano was not ready to let her go. He led her through the palazzo, weaving through gilded corridors and opulent chambers until they reached a private balcony overlooking the Grand Canal. The city stretched before them, its lights mirrored in the dark waters below. Adriano turned to Selene, his mask discarded, his gaze filled with curiosity and desire. "Tell me your name," he said. "Selene," she replied, her voice soft. "And what brings you to Venice, Selene?" She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his chest. "I've come to see if the stories about you are true." Adriano laughed, a low, rich sound. "And what have you found so far?" Selene's smile widened. "That you're a man who thinks himself untouchable." Adriano's confidence faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, and Selene let him. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, Adriano felt as though he were drowning in her. Her scent, her taste, her very essence. When they finally broke apart, Adriano was breathless. Selene, however, remained calm, her crimson eyes gleaming behind her mask. "You're intoxicating," he said, his voice unsteady. "And you're naive," she replied, her tone suddenly cold. Before he could react, she pushed him against the balcony rail, her strength far greater than her delicate frame suggested. Adriano struggled, but Selene held him firmly in place. "What are you doing?" he demanded, fear creeping into his voice. Selene tilted her head, her fangs glinting in the moonlight. "Teaching you a lesson in humility." She sank her teeth into his neck, and Adriano's protest turned into a gasp of pleasure. His knees buckled as Selene drained him, his heartbeat slowing with each passing second. When it was over, she released him, letting his body collapse onto the cold marble floor. He was alive, but barely, a shell of the man he had been. Selene knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You'll live," she said, "but you'll never forget me." She stood, smoothing her gown, and disappeared into the night, leaving Adriano alone on the balcony, his once charismatic face now pale and hollow. As dawn approached, Selene wandered through the streets of Venice. The city's beauty dimmed in her eyes. She had taken what she needed, but the emptiness within her remained. Perhaps Florence was too recent, she mused aloud. Perhaps I need something darker. Her lips curved into a faint smile as she thought of her next destination. Prague, she whispered. Yes, Prague will do nicely. And with that, she vanished into the shadows, her journey far from over.